Welcome back everyone to Kerbal Space Program Better Than Ever. Now you'll remember in the previous episode, the fateful episode 13, we managed to get a series of 3 satellites around the equator of Kerbin to begin our communications network for remote tech. Well, since then, Jeb and I have been busy, and we have launched another 3 satellites around the poles of Kerbin just to cover the void of communications around the poles if ever we need to send missions to those locations. It'll also enable us to fill any gaps in our communications network due to the satellites bunching up a little. But I think it's about time we actually tested our communications network. So let's pop over to Mission Control and see if Jean has anything to offer for us. It turns out that Genbal Kerman didn't get the memo. Health and safety have barred Kerbals from going off Kerbin, but he decided he was going anyway. And of course things didn't go well for him, so it's about time we send up a craft to go and rescue him. So let's pop over to the VAB and do just that. So we need a vehicle to rescue Genbal with, so rather than build one from scratch, here is one I created earlier. Nothing too unusual about it. We have a probe core on top, a Staputnik Mark 1. We have an empty command pod. I did ask Jeb to step aside for this one. I did point out it could get rather crowded with the 2 of them in the single manned command pod. We have in here our rendezvous and return stage with an LV-909 engine hidden under here. And then our launch stage is fairly traditional. We have an asparagus stage, outer stage here with the LVT-45 engines, and then the more powerful LVT-30 in the centre. We do of course have our antenna, the Reflectron DP10, and of course our Communitron for our low altitude communications network. Now I've actually bound those to the lights action group. We don't actually have any lights, but at least it means we can set the action group for the Communitron and for these solar panels onto a single click, just to make it a little easier. Just to make sure that our outer asparagus stage separates correctly, I've also put some separatrons here onto the top of these stages just to push it away from the main body. But that's not the last thing we're going to do. We are going to make a very slight change to this model just to make it a little more interesting. From the command and control section, we're going to pick out this Scriptable Control System from kOS. This will allow us to automate some of the activities of our flight and make up for the fact that Jeb isn't available. So let's pop on out to the launch pad and go save Genbal. Out here on the launch pad we're going to do things a little bit differently than usual. We're going to do some of the launch using the kOS terminal, so selecting the kOS launcher button. We've only got one CPU, which is highlighted there in a rather natty purple, and we'll open its terminal window. So let's now just clear that launcher panel. And the terminal window looks rather like those 1970s, showing my age now, 1970s green screen terminals. Now the first thing we need to do is just understand the basic structure of commands, and a command such as clear screen is ended with a full stop. All commands end with a full stop. Now that was just a single line command, it's executed, it's gone, but we can use the up arrow to recover and re-execute a command if we want to execute a command again. Now the first command we're going to use is to lock the steering, and you can lock the steering to a direction, and in this case we're going to lock the steering to up, and that's rather like setting on the SAS and using that to keep your vehicle going on the straight and narrow. I would like to point out that you can't actually use SAS when you're using the Kerbal operating system. It does rather get in the way, but you don't need it because you can lock steering to a direction. Now before we forget, let's make sure we get to maximum throttle. And now we're ready to actually launch, and we'll use the stage command to do that. So let's get cracking. Genball needs rescue. Now your first thing you'll notice is our ship has rather started to rotate rather alarmingly. And that's because the up direction has a rotation of 180 degrees compared to where the ship is actually on the platform. Now you can correct for this, and we'll look into that later. But for the moment, let's just concentrate on the fact that we are successfully going straight up and just manage our throttle. We're a little bit over vertical speed at the moment, so let's just bring the vertical speed down to more or less terminal velocity. There we go. Now of course kOS has a lot of other features and functions, and one of them is to lock the throttle to a value. Now it doesn't have to be a constant, it can also be an expression, and that expression will be re-evaluated over and over and over again as your craft flies, so you can use quite complicated expressions to control your throttle to terminal velocity, or like MechJeb does, to set a nice curve to your ascent profile. But let's now get ready to lock our steering to a heading, and it's a rather simplistic heading of 90 degrees east with a 45-degree pitch. So let's lock that in. Now you'll notice our craft rotating again, and that's because our heading has no roll setting. It only gives you compass setting and pitch. And unfortunately, there's a 90-degree difference between that and our craft as it ascended. So let's get ready now to separate our next stage as the liquid fuel runs out. Now because of our little twist, we've now got a bit of an inclination, but we'll sort that out later. And there goes our stage. We'll execute the stage instruction, and separation complete. We are now on our journey. Bang. There goes our tanks. I don't think we'll be recovering them. Now here we see our apoapsis is 48, Genball is at 95, so we'll come up to 80 something, and then just sort out an intercept with him once we have arrived in orbit. So there we go, 62, 65 kilometers. Get ready to cut our throttle. Notice I have clicked away from our terminal window, so it's lost focus, so I have an opportunity there to control the engine. So we're doing rather well. Now let's activate the lights, which we can do from here, or we can do it from the terminal. Lights on. Now there aren't actually any lights, but they will trigger associated devices, which in this case are our solar panels and our communitron. Now before we forget, we do have to circularize, so let's set a maneuver node. Again, you can do this with kOS, but it's one of the more advanced techniques, so we'll leave that for another episode. Let's just bring that back a little. I think we've rather overdone the apoapsis there. Let's bring that back to just see Genball a little bit ahead of us, so we want to stay as circular as possible. Just close in a little bit, just move that ahead. There we go. Now one of the other commands we can use is lock steering to the next node in the cycle. There could be many, but we'll lock it to the next node. And you can see we are now pointing towards our new node marker. We have a burn of 43, but if we go out of map view, we'll need to make sure we have sufficient fuel to complete this activity, which we don't quite, so we're going to start a little bit early. So let's start about now. Let's get up to max throttle, because the LV909 has less thrust than the LVT30, so that last bit of delta V is going to take a little bit longer to supply. So Let's just get ready to stage our next stage. Use the up arrow to go through our list of commands, retrieve a previous stage command, and when we run out of fuel we will hit that stage command. So a few more seconds left. There we go. Let's jettison that last launch stage there. And then get ready to kill the throttle. There we are. We're now in orbit as the camera flips. There we go. Now the next thing we need to do is unlock the steering, because if we don't, when we delete the maneuver node, the lock steering command will generate an error because there's no node for it to be pointing to. So there we are in orbit. Not entirely automated, but we did make use of the Scriptable Autopilot System to at least make use of the fact we don't have any SAS available to us. Now, where is Genbel? He is a little bit ahead of us now, so we are going to have to do a few cycles around our orbit to catch him up. So we'll return when we're ready to make the rendezvous. A little bit of maneuver node juggling later, I now have an intersection for 0.6 of a kilometre, so 600 metres. Now, rather than using kOS to do this, we will use remote text flight computer. So a little bit like we locked the steering to next node, we will now use the node command to lock ourselves onto the next node, and we will execute the node maneuver itself, which is in 24 minutes. Let's just increase time warp and warp around to our maneuver. Now we know that the flight computer will take into account our time warp, so we'll just warp up to maximum, which is 50 times time warp, and we will let the ballet commence. We are just dipping inside of Genbel now, so we are gaining on him, ready to make our node. It's 63 meters per second, which is not that much. And here we go, executing that maneuver. And there we're done. So our maneuver has given us, there we are, 0.4. It actually improved. So that's pretty good in my mind. We are, however, on the dark side of Kerbin, so we will have to be very careful with our approach that we don't run out of battery power. It is rather limited. So here's to some good luck. We will use our warp to DN just to bring us around to the far side of Kerbin, and we'll use that as a way of beginning our arrival with Genbel. There he is. The Genbel 1 coming in just behind him. So we've got a relative speed of only 30.7 meters per second. We are on a very, very similar orbit, so our relative speed is going to be pretty similar. So let's just get out of map view. Now, as a little trick, we will use kOS to do this. You can now do set. Oh, we don't even use a set command. The set command is used to set variables. We just need to set the map view off. And there we go, out of map view. Only 2.5 kilometers from Genbel there. Let's switch back to the flight computer. We want to go relative retrograde. And just bring our target velocity down to 0. At which point we will be flying in perfect harmony with good old Genball. So there we go, down to 11, 10, 7, 4, and cut engines. So there we are now perfectly running parallel. So let's go target positive. Swinging around. We do need to take good care of our electric charge, but good thing is we're not very far away from Genball. So let's just use a little bit of our engine speed, coming in at 3 meters per second, and we will now go target relative retrograde, and just wait for us to drift towards Genball at just under 3 meters per second. So this is a pretty standard approach now, but just making use of the flight computer rather than manually setting our trajectory. So let's just speed up time a little, let that distance close. There we go, 1.5 meters. We are beginning to drift away, so let's go cancel out our relative velocity and then reapproach. So target prograde. Being very careful. There we go, 1.4. 1.3, we're drifting away again. So let's go relative retrograde. And then target positive. There we are, going pretty much directly for him. We are still drifting, so I think we're going to have to try something a little bit more adventurous. Let's try a little bit more thrust. Make sure we're going directly towards him. There we go. We're just over a kilometre. So target retrograde. The relative retrograde, I should say. Ready to slow down as we approach. Want to get to less than 100 meters, give Genball a good chance to actually catch us up. Oh dear, he's been up here long enough. I think he needs a bit of a hand getting on board. So there we are, 800 meters. Drifting gently towards him at 11 meters per second, a little bit fast. But we can quite easily cancel that out with our LV909. Now, of course, for more advanced kOS users, a rendezvous script should be fairly straightforward, but I'm anything but advanced, so we will leave this to the manual professionals. Do it the old way, old style. Here we go, 500 meters. I think it's about time we cancelled out and reapproached. So down to 5, 3, and kill. And we go target prograde again. Getting through our charge, we're about halfway through our charge now. But let's now reapproach and get ready to slow down when we get to a little bit under 100 meters. You can see we're not quite going straight towards Genball, but close enough. At least we won't crash into him. That's one thing we won't be doing. So there's 400 meters. Can't imagine what Genball was doing up here. It's been a while now that health and safety have prohibited any Kerbals in space, so He's either been up here a very long time or was a stowaway on a previous vehicle. We may never know. So coming up to 300 metres. Here we go. Approaching it just over 3 metres per second. We are beginning to drift apart, but we are still approaching, so we'll leave that. And I think we've now come back out into the sun. So our charge is now recovering, so that's good. Just as we come in to recover Genball. So 200 metres. Now we are beginning to just about see Genball now, just about becoming visible there. Now we are actually the wrong way around, so we will probably have to rotate at some point, but let's worry about that in a moment. So let's just kill our speed as we come in parallel to Genball. There we go. So let's just kill our rotation. So we're now floating exactly in parallel. So I think we will rotate the craft. Here we are. So we're now in parallel, but at least now Genball doesn't have to fight his way across to the other side of the cockpit. So let's switch over to Genball. Let's go and control Genball. There he is. Yeah, Genball, we get you. We get you. Let's switch on his RCS and get him on his way over to, there we go, just see in the distance, see the crew hatch on this side. So let's just pop over there. 110, 100, there we go, we're under 100 now. A little bit over to the right, I think, and slow down. Don't want to go tearing past. 64. 52. There we go, 50 metres. Heading straight for the hatch. 42. I think we're doing pretty well here. Nice approach speed. Plenty of light to see what we're doing. And as we just come in, try not to... breaking the antenna would now not be a good thing to do. So let's make sure we don't do that. Let's just slow down a little. Fortunately, we're on the side with the DP10, so the Communitron should be safe. Okay, Genball. Yeah, I hear you, Genball. You're almost there. Coming into the hatch now. And let's grab on and board. Excellent. Oh dear. That was actually remarkably uneventful. So we managed the rendezvous. We managed to collect Genball Kerman. All that remains is for us to get back to KSC. So let's have a look at doing that. Where are we relative to KSC? KSC is just over the horizon there, so let's see if we can't add a manoeuvre and bring Genball in somewhere over the ocean. So he will land somewhere behind KSC if we implement that node. So let's try doing that. So let's switch off kill rotation and let's go to the node. Now you'll notice that we have local control now because we have a Kerbal on board, but we can still use the flight computer if we want to. So there is the node. We are targeted to that node, so let's execute in 4 minutes' time. Now, Kerbin will rotate. We will lose some accuracy as we go through the atmosphere, but hopefully we'll land somewhere not too distant from the Kerbal Space Center, not give Genbal that far to walk. So let's just up time warp and let the computer handle this burn. It's a 3-second burn from the RV909, not too much. Although it was a little bit of a miscalculation, it would seem, on 3 seconds. But we have plenty of fuel, so I don't think that's going to prove too much of a problem. So let's delete the node. Come out of map view. Now we don't actually need our transmitters anymore, so let us switch the lights off, which we can either do from here, or as we know, we can switch the lights off, and away go our panels, and away goes our communitron. So now it's just a case of returning to Kerbin. But let's lock steering to retrograde. If only I could spell. Retrograde. There we go. There we are, doing its best to keep us on retrograde as we go towards the surface at a heck of a speed. 1,846 meters per second. So I think as we start to head towards the atmosphere, I will unlock the steering, ready to allow the atmosphere to do its thing and bring us in towards Kerbin's oceans. Let's have a look where we're predicting to land, because obviously we've got to remember that Kerbin is rotating, so we're still landing in the middle of this ocean at the moment, but we will lose some of that with our parachutes pulling us back against air resistance, and also of course just general drag. So let's prepare to come in. We'll speed up time a little bit until we reach, there we are, we've reached the top of the atmosphere. At about 30 is where the atmosphere gets starts to get thicker. So we can afford to time accelerate through here. Looks like we're going to miss KSC and land in the ocean. But at least General won't have far to swim. That assumes he can swim, of course. Now let's get ready to fire our rockets, fire our final stage, which is our parachutes. So we will fire them now, so they will activate shortly, and let's close the terminal. We don't need that now. And we also can power this off if we want to. Here we go, get the parachutes bringing us in. Actually, you know, we might not be too bad. We might not be too bad. Maybe a bit of a wade in the rock pools, perhaps. Gembal's not looking too pleased. You are coming home, Gembal. Maybe it's the swim he's not looking forward to. let's do this. Let's switch off the kill rotation. There we go. Just allow us to come straight down. So it's entirely under your control, Jemble. It's up to you now. That was pretty close for me. Flight computer, kOS or not, that was pretty close. Not that this is going to survive a splashdown. So we have still got to survive the splashdown. But at least he is going to have a fairly short swim, because I'm sure the capture will survive even if we can't recover the rest of the return vessel. There we go, coming into 3 kilometers above sea level. 2.5. 1.3. Parachutes will open at 500 and we'll see we're at 100 meters per second now. Hopefully we will slow down to well below 10. 7.7. It's going to be a bit of a splashdown, I think. So we might lose the engine, or maybe maybe even the tank, because it has got quite a lot of fuel left. We had plenty of fuel, so this is going to be quite a heavy vessel returning at 7.5 meters per second. 300 meters up. I think Jemble's a little bit happier now, and I think I will be when we have a successful splashdown. So I think, just for the record, I think we're going to get this as a postcard. Prove we did it. 100 meters, 7.4 meters per second. So cross your fingers, everyone. 20 meters. No. Yep, I thought we might lose that. And Jemble doesn't even seem to be the slightest bit perturbed. Oh dear. Well, we lost a rather full fuel tank and an LV909. We will probably be able to recover one of our solar panels, but not the other. Let's just turn Jemble upright so he will be able to get out, and leave him to swim to shore. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching this first kOS sponsored Kerbal Space Program adventure, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.